When the Duke Orsino announced, "If music be the food of love, play on, give me excess of it, that surfeiting, the appetite may sicken, and so die," I have to admit I laughed. Such a pompous, self-important man who loved himself above all others, and could no more love another than he could love a mirror. I had been laughing at the Duke for some time, of course. The man had made rather a nuisance of himself to my lady's court. I miss him terribly. Little did I understand at the time that this was no grand statement of desire, nor the pretentious squawking of some bored noble who was venting his frustration at his inability to woo my mistress Olivia. None of us knew at the time that it was a summoning, a dire call into the wild cosmos, where things beyond our ken lurked and plotted events that would lead to the demise of us all. The courts of Illyria were once a grand and special place. The dancing, the song, the plays. I hated it all, but by the Lord Almighty, do I miss it now? Maybe it has been my own fine sense of taste and disgust at unnecessary revelry that has saved my soul thus far, or maybe I am more deserving of torture than most. Now nothing changes, nor will it ever do so. Nothing will grow here, not love nor wheat. And so I scratch parchment with quill in an attempt to relate to you how Illyria fell into this dark and unyielding temperament, to be lost forevermore beneath the waves of ill passion. It began, as these disasters always do, with a stranger. The herald Cesario was new to Illyria. I pride myself on my spies and my sources, though if I were to be modest, as I often am, though I consider it more a vice than a virtue, I would admit that my spies are drawn from simple folk who are wont to tell elaborate tales for simple coin. Thus I took the far-spun stories of Cesario's origin to be simple hyperbole. The fair-skinned eunuch didn't look like he had come from anywhere more exotic than the land of Messaline, although having kin in that blasted and vile land would be enough for any man to hide their origin. Had I only asked what he was a herald of, then perhaps we would have all been spared. In hindsight, I should have been more cautious and listened to those in my employ more. Fool that I am, I had already begun my own obsessions, and the pounding of my heart had deafened the wisdom pouring into my ears. I had begun to dare to hope that my Lady Olivia had looked upon me with a more favourable eye than I had ever imagined. Little did I know at the time that I was being deceived. I had frequently dismissed Sir Toby Belch, my lady's uncle and a true cove and knave, yet long considered him an ally. He had seen off suitors to his niece in the past as a matter of course. Many of the fine men of Illyria had attempted to woo the Lady Olivia, only to fall foul of Sir Toby's kind and welcoming smile and an open bottle of wine. At the time, I had concluded that the man was a drunk first and a fool second, but for a time he was a confederate of mine. Suitors would come, and we would conspire to ruin the chances of any and all of them who came to pass. If a simple wrong footing from me failed, then Toby was there with his repulsive habits of wine and song to lure the unwise into a ditch, where they lay ashamed and typically short of purse. I could have put a stop to the practice, but I was so enchanted by my lady that I simply turned a blind eye. Well, as much as I could. My distaste for the man was immense, and he would often abuse the hospitality of anyone who showed him kindness. He possessed none of the beauty of his niece, his face red and his hands yellowed. His body was a monument to neglect, as if he was slowly forgetting that he had anything but a belly and a mouth and hands with which to fill it. I should have seen the signs. I should have realized that when his friend Sir Andrew Aguecheek arrived, that the man was merely a servant of a greater darkness. But how could I have known? I was never one for plays or merriment, and, as I say, I was distracted. A letter from my lady took my mind. I was led to believe that the Lady Olivia had affection for me. Love is a dagger often pointed at the heart, and I was cruelly wounded by this plot. I know now that it was no cruel jest. The letter bid me to wear yellow in a way that pleased Sir Toby's dark master rather than the Lady Olivia. Its instruction and his cunning led me to act the fool, and yet worse, lead me to forget who I was. I am the famous steward of the Lady Olivia, the one named Malvolio. It was I who was responsible for her safety. Even if the letter was true, and it was not, I should have done my duty and protected her from all the suitors who sought to use the widow's grief against her and plunder her wealth. It is my belief that Sir Toby's machinations were ritual in design, for not only did I wear the banner colours of his secret lord, I was bid to behave in a way that was not in my nature. I sacrificed the things that made me who I was, not only for the folly of love, but for this dark force that lurked all too close to us all. Such behaviour would see me locked away, which is only right for those who have lost their minds. Only fortune's fair smile let me escape such a mire, and only the scratching of a quill helps me stay clinging to what little sanity remains. I have my freedom, but only because my jailer was a fool. It was I who let the herald into our court. My lady has often entertained the Duke Orsino. His position is such that our usual tricks have never been attempted on the likes of him. Fortunately, the man is such a narcissist that there was never any hope that she would fall for him. Cesario, his page, was another matter entirely. Orsino's herald was blessed with an illusionary blush of youth, and seemed to have the ear of anyone he cared to talk to. He arrived in the strangest garb I ever did see, long robes and a pallid mask, his long arms covered in pale white silks. All of this was used to great effect, the masker disguised to reveal the equally pale but alluring youth beneath. Little did I understand what the herald truly was. My sources, of course, had too many wild stories to tell about this herald. That he was in fact a she, that she had survived a recent shipwreck and had lost her brother in the same tragic wreck. An unlikely story. Nothing human survives the shores of Illyria. These were the least of the outlandish claims. Others said that he did in fact have a brother, a monstrous one who had indeed come from the sea, but that the sea was also his home. Some said that the herald's true name was Viola. Others claimed it was a more foreign name, that the herald hailed from the long-lost land called Carcosa, and was in truth its renegade prince, Hastur. Never dismiss anything as fanciful nonsense. It may well end you. I pieced together the full deception. Remember that I had drunk deep of the food and wine of love, and was in my cups with misplaced passion. Cesario, or whatever his name may have been, was playing a different game from that of love with both the Lady Olivia and the Duke Orsino. To my lady, he was her pallid king. Though I was not privy to their private conversations, I feel that the results were plain to see. Illyria's finest beauty lay ruined by the promise of the exotic and the unknown, her wit and regard eaten away by promises and lies meant to confound earthly wit. To the Duke, I understand the idiot simply fell for the fey herald's mystery. His coy innocence and strangeness broke the bounds of brotherly love into something other. He was once such a kind man, though a fool. As his humour changed, so too the city under his charge. The banners that bedecked its walls were replaced with a yellow sign, one that made your eyes leak to even look at it. It was then that the ague began, men, strong as an ox, losing all sense of who they were and suddenly behaving as if they were someone else entirely. Elders who had spent their lives on this land suddenly forgetting the place they were standing and calling each street and river by strange and foreign names. The Duke had changed, poisoned by the food of love. It was the Duke who announced the play, a strange and foreign play, one that I had thought was banned, and yet I was too filled with the idea of grand romance to speak up. He was always one for song and dance, but this was the strangest of plays. Illyria is not short of playwrights and actors. They infest this land like they do anywhere that allows a man to stand idle. Yet the performers came in their hordes, each to try out a role. The bars along the docks swiftly filled as actors came to the Duke's newly opened theatre to try out for this fantastic play. Never will I see a more ragged bunch. Those who came to audition never seemed the same again, their eyes sunken, their faces slack. Rumours of disease spread like wildfire, of course, and then the docks were full again, this time with fine citizens looking to flee whatever ailment was coming from that awful playhouse. The exodus began on the calmest of days. Illyria has never seen such a ragged fleet. Each and every ship filled with people, all leaving. The Duke, refusing to issue even a simple quarantine, had announced his new play ready, and that the opening night would be that very evening. I suspect that those with enough sense were urged to flee faster. Maybe had they not been in such a hurry, then fewer would have drowned, but few survived the shores of Illyria. The waves were the size of mountains. Those of us who still had our wits, and had stayed behind, watched agog as the elements themselves struck out at those who had the courage to leave. I had never seen water move like that, lashing tendrils of spite and malice, ripping the ships apart and devouring them whole. The storm had a shape, something that looked to be not a bat, nor bear, nor squid, nor shark, but something all the more monstrous, lurking titan-like in the darkness as a tempest. I watched solemnly as the few who remained filed, one by one, to the playhouse, surrendering to the inevitable. I have not seen them since. I'd even welcomed the presence of Sir Toby, but he was first in line to see the final play. This was his goal all along, to embrace the ultimate excess and be drawn into this dark madness of music and pomp, which eats the very soul. I returned to my lady's court, to find it empty save for her. In her hand she held a pallid mask, and she wept openly into it, her wit stolen from her by this poisonous love. Cesario had fled to be with the Duke. The cad had suggested that she throw herself at the mercy of his brother, a strange foreigner with a stranger-sounding name. Still, I have always been my lady's most humble servant. So as my ink runs out and the scratching sound of the quill ceases, I will take the Lady Olivia to meet this brother, this stranger, this man, if that he be, named Cthulhu.